what's really going to change now? Because there's also this report that Uber had a hack, and it seems like anytime there's a hack in the private sector, it's a very different response than when the government gets hacked. Why is that, and what does the government need to do to better protect this information?
So, I mean, what we've already seen since this was disclosed in September is just a lot of scrutiny on the SEC, on other agencies in the federal government, on how they're protecting sensitive data. Government essentially has a big treasure trove that would actually dwarf anything that we could even imagine a private company having. So the government right now and agencies like the SEC are really trying to find a way to make sure that they're keeping it safe. What the SEC said is they're going back right now, looking through their practices, what kind of information they need, what kind of information they don't need, and they're going to probably have to adjust some of their policies. It's kind of worth noting, too. I mean, the SEC is the agency that turns around to corporations and said, hey, if you have a cyber attack, you got to let us know if it's material or important.
Kettle black, pot calling the kettle black.
There's a lot of criticism right now. It's worth noting this happened before the current SEC chairman, was on board, and he discovered this, he says, in August, and he's taken steps. But, this is just kind of the latest piece of news, and, certainly an ongoing problem they're going to have to deal with.
Yeah, that irony hasn't really been lost there. Do we know if there was any suspicious trading around the breach?
What the SEC said, way back in, seems like way back in September when they said this, is that they believe there may have been illicit trading. We don't actually know whether insider trading happened. The SEC's enforcement division, which basically is the arm of about 1,000 lawyers and staff that look at these kinds of things, has an ongoing investigation. So that's really kind of what I think everyone's waiting to see what happened. Worth also noting, the piece of this Edgar corporate filing system that had the breach is for dummy filings. So it's basically stuff that a newer company might want to kind of get comfortable with the system. So they put some forms to the SEC and they try to figure out how the whole thing works. They're told not to put sensitive information, but what we understand happened is a couple of people at least put things like names, social security numbers, and when this breach happened, when this hack happened, whoever was behind it, which we now understand likely came from Eastern Europe, got their hands on it.
Ben, from your perspective, how is the public-private partnership on cybersecurity working in this administration?
Well, I mean, it's a little early still, I think. It's certainly not the first administrations that's dealt with this. I remember even, I think probably 7 or 8 years ago, covering cybersecurity a bit in Washington, and they were talking about what they were going to do with this problem. And corporations wanted the government to do certain things. The government wanted corporations. There's always this kind of push and pull. And if we look at what's really happened in the last 8 or 9 years, not a whole lot in terms of a clear standards. Congress is always kicking around the idea of passing some kind of bill. And the more of these kinds of incidents happen, you mentioned Uber, earlier, there's just more and more pressure to do something.